Please subscribe to this channel. Thank you.
Part 1, Origins and Historical Context of the Lost Tribes. In Part 1, we'll examine the origins of the Lost Tribes, beginning with the early history of the Kingdom of Israel, its division, and the exile that led to the dispersal of the 10 tribes. We'll explore the political, social, and theological implications of these events and establish the context in which these tribes disappeared. Key sections: the unified kingdom and division. 1. Overview of Israel under Saul, David, and Solomon. 2. The division into the northern kingdom, Israel, and the southern kingdom, Judah. The Assyrian conquest. 1. How Assyria's military conquests under Shalmaneser V and Sargon II led to the exile of the 10 tribes. 2. Details on the process and motives behind the forced relocation of the Israelites. Biblical accounts and prophecies. 1. Key verses and prophecies from the Bible regarding the scattering and potential return of the tribes. 2. Analysis of how different religious traditions interpret these prophecies. The role of the lost tribes in Jewish and Christian eschatology. 1. Jewish interpretations, the hope for a return and restoration in the Messianic era. 2. Christian interpretations, theological implications within various Christian denominations. Historiography and sources. 1. How historians, ancient and modern, have documented the dispersion. 2. Sources from non-biblical ancient records that may corroborate or contradict biblical accounts. Establishing the mystery. 1. Why the fate of these tribes became a point of intrigue, sparking theories and speculation over the centuries. Section 1, the Unified Kingdom and its division. This section provides a foundation for understanding Israel's early history, setting the stage for the events that led to the lost tribes' exile. Formation of the United Kingdom of Israel. 1. Background. Before the monarchy, Israel was a confederation of tribes, each independently governed but bound by a common covenant with God. 1. Saul, David, and Solomon. Saul's kingship marked the first united monarchy, but David and Solomon are credited with cementing the unity and stability of Israel. 1. Under Solomon, Israel reached its peak, controlling strategic trade routes and amassing regional wealth and influence. Internal divisions leading to the split. 1. Solomon's reign and taxes. Solomon's ambitious building projects, including the First Temple, demanded heavy taxation and labor. 1. This strain created discontent, especially in the northern tribes. 1. Rehoboam's reign. After Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam ascended the throne and intensified the rift by rejecting the northern tribes' appeals for relief from heavy taxes. 1. The kingdom's division. Rehoboam's refusal triggered the secession of the 10 northern tribes, forming the Kingdom of Israel, while the southern kingdom of Judah remained loyal to the Davidic line. Cultural and political differences. 1. Religious practices. Unlike Judah, which centered worship around Jerusalem, the northern kingdom established alternative religious centers, notably in Dan and Bethel, to prevent pilgrimage to Jerusalem. 1. Political fragmentation. The northern kingdom faced internal instability, with a succession of coups and dynastic changes that weakened its unity and left it vulnerable to external threats. Section 2, the Assyrian conquest and the exile of the 10 tribes. The Assyrian conquest is central to understanding the fate of the lost tribes. This section explores how the Assyrian Empire expanded, targeted Israel, and led to the dispersal of its people. Assyria's expansionist policies. 1. Imperial goals. The Assyrian Empire sought to dominate the ancient Near East, subjugating smaller states like Israel to secure tribute and control trade. 1. Assyrian military strategy. Assyrian military tactics were formidable, involving siege warfare, psychological tactics, and brutal punishments for resistance. 1. These strategies effectively subdued many territories. Conquest of Israel. 1. Shalmaneser V and Sargon II. In 722 BCE, King Shalmaneser V laid siege to Samaria, the capital of Israel, an effort completed by his successor, Sargon II. 1. This led to the fall of Samaria and the annexation of Israel. 1. The exile process. The Assyrians deported much of Israel's population to other regions of their empire, including Assyria and Media. 1. This relocation policy was intended to prevent rebellion by dispersing communities and breaking their connection to their land and identity. Impacts of deportation. 1. Assimilation and loss of identity. The dispersed Israelites likely faced significant pressure to assimilate, with their unique cultural and religious practices gradually diminishing over generations. 1. Survival in foreign lands. Evidence suggests that some exiles maintained a semblance of their heritage, but over time, many likely intermarried and adopted the customs of their new locales, effectively disappearing as a distinct group. Section 3. Biblical accounts and prophecies. The Bible contains accounts and prophecies about the fate of the 10 tribes, fueling centuries of speculation and hope regarding their eventual return. Biblical references to the 10 tribes' exile. 1. The books of Kings and Chronicles. These books recount the Assyrian conquest and the exile of the 10 tribes, emphasizing the consequences of Israel's disobedience to God's commandments. 1. Prophetic warnings. Prophets like Amos and Hosea forewarned of Israel's downfall, interpreting the exile as divine punishment for idolatry and moral failings. Prophecies of a future reunion. 1. Isaiah and Jeremiah's promises. Later prophets, such as Isaiah and Jeremiah, offered hopeful visions of a future in which all tribes of Israel would reunite and return to their homeland. 1. These prophecies were particularly important in post-exilic Jewish thought. 1. Ezekiel's vision of the 2 sticks. In Ezekiel 37, God tells the prophet to join 2 sticks representing Judah and Ephraim, often symbolizing the northern tribes, as a sign of a future reunification. Interpretations in Jewish and Christian thought. 1. Jewish eschatology. Many Jewish scholars interpreted the prophecies as contingent on collective repentance and the coming of the Messiah. 1. Christian interpretations. Some Christian sects see the 10 tribes as having a role in end-times prophecies, often linking them to modern peoples or groups that they believe have inherited the tribe's legacy. Section 4. The Lost Tribes in Jewish and Christian Eschatology. The theme of the Lost Tribes' return became embedded in Jewish and Christian eschatological visions, influencing religious thought across centuries. Jewish views on the Lost Tribes' return. 1. Messianic era. In Jewish tradition, the return of the Lost Tribes is a key feature of the Messianic era. 1. This belief was especially significant during times of hardship, offering hope for national restoration. 1. The gathering of the exiles. Rabbinic literature and later Jewish writings often reference the concept of kibbutz gayet, ingathering of exiles, anticipating a divine intervention to reunite the tribes. Christian apocalyptic interpretations. 1. Millenarian beliefs. In Christian eschatology, the lost tribes are often linked to prophecies about the end times, particularly in some Protestant and evangelical sects that interpret the tribes' return as a sign of the second coming. 1. Identity of the tribes in Christian thought. Groups like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church, believe they have a spiritual role in reuniting the tribes as part of their mission. Influence on modern Zionism. 1. Political and spiritual relevance. For some early Zionists, the concept of the lost tribes symbolized the need to reunite all Jews in their ancestral land. 1. This theme, while more symbolic than literal, has resonated within Zionist thought. Section 5. Historiography and sources. This section delves into how historians and scholars have documented the lost tribes, exploring different sources and their reliability. Biblical texts as historical sources. 1. The challenge of biblical chronology. Biblical accounts are central to understanding the exile, but they must be examined critically alongside other ancient sources due to the mythological and theological layers. 1. Parallels in other ancient texts. While the Bible provides the primary account of the lost tribes, texts from neighboring cultures also reference Israel, helping contextualize the biblical narrative. Ancient Assyrian records. 1. Assyrian cuneiform tablets. Records such as the Annals of Sargon II provide non-biblical accounts of the conquest, supporting the historical reality of Israel's fall. 1. Limitations of Assyrian sources. While Assyrian records offer concrete evidence of the conquest, they lack detailed information on the fate of individual exiles, leaving gaps in the historical record. Later historical and literary accounts. 1. Josephus and other Jewish historians. The Jewish historian Josephus mentions the exiled tribes in his writings, which influenced later Jewish and Christian interpretations. 1. Rabbinic literature. Post-biblical Jewish texts, including the Talmud, contain references to the lost tribes, with descriptions of their possible locations and future returns. Section 6. Establishing the mystery. Here, we address why the lost tribes continue to captivate the imagination, exploring the development of myths and theories about their fate. The allure of the unknown. 1. Human fascination with lost peoples. The mystery of the lost tribes taps into a universal intrigue with ancient, vanished cultures and the desire to uncover hidden histories. 1. Religious and cultural impact. For many, the lost tribes symbolize both a national tragedy and a hopeful promise, inspiring stories, myths, and even new religious movements. Development of myths and legends over time. 1. Medieval Jewish narratives. Stories about the lost tribes' location began to circulate in the medieval period, with rabbis and travelers speculating on where they might be found. 1. Western exploration and the lost tribes. European explorers in the Age of Discovery sometimes linked new lands or indigenous peoples to the lost tribes, further fueling mythologies about their fate. Modern implications of the lost tribes mystery. 1. Identity and connection. For both Jewish and non-Jewish groups, the idea of descent from the lost tribes has offered a sense of belonging and historical purpose. 1. Symbolism in modern culture. The lost tribes continues to symbolize themes of exile, identity, and redemption, influencing literature, art, and modern religious beliefs.
Please subscribe to this channel. Thank you.
The Lost Tribes of Israel, Myths and Truths Revealed. Part 2. Myths, Legends, and Theories about the Lost Tribes. This part will cover the myriad myths and theories surrounding the lost tribes. From fantastical legends to more grounded theories, this section delves into how various groups and nations around the world have identified with or claimed descent from the lost tribes. Key sections: Jewish and non-Jewish claims. 1. Overview of Jewish groups who trace their lineage to one of the lost tribes. 2. Examples of non-Jewish claims, such as those by the British Israelite movement. The 10 lost tribes in folklore and legend. 1. The story of Sambatun River, a mystical river believed to mark the boundary of the tribe's residence. 2. Other legendary locations believed to be the home of the tribes. Theories of scattered descendants around the world. 1. Claims of descent in regions as diverse as Ethiopia, Japan, Afghanistan, and Native American tribes. 2. Cultural and genetic studies, where applicable, on groups such as the Pashtuns, the Beta Israel, Ethiopian Jews, and others. Lost tribes and modern nationalism. 1. The role that the idea of lost tribes has played in the national identities of groups around the world. 2. How claims of descent have impacted policies and religious practices, especially in Israel. Examining the British Israel theory. 1. The roots and development of the British Israel theory, which suggests that Anglo-Saxons are descended from the lost tribes. 2. Influence on British and American ideologies in the 19th and 20th centuries. Modern religious groups and their interest in the lost tribes. 1. How modern religions and sects, for example, Mormons, some evangelical groups, incorporate the lost tribes into their teachings. 2. Exploration of how these beliefs influence missionary work and conversion practices. Jewish and non-Jewish claims. This section covers the different groups worldwide that claim descent from the lost tribes, exploring the reasons behind these claims and the significance of such identities for these communities. Jewish communities claiming descent from the lost tribes. 1. B'nai Manasseh of Northeast India. The B'nai Manasseh claim descent from the tribe of Manasseh. 1. They maintain distinct Jewish practices and customs believed to be passed down over generations. 1. Recent DNA testing has fueled both skepticism and intrigue, and Israel has recognized the B'nai Manasseh as a part of the diaspora, leading to limited immigration rights. 1. Beta Israel, Ethiopian Jews, also known as Falashas, the Beta Israel have historically claimed descent from the tribe of Dan. 1. Although there is some debate over their origins, they have been recognized as Jews and permitted to immigrate to Israel under the law of return. 1. Beni Israel and Cochin Jews of India. Jewish communities in India, including the Beni Israel of Maharashtra and the Cochin Jews of Kerala, have claimed a connection to ancient Israel. 1. Some claim that their ancestors arrived after the Assyrian conquest, while others believe they came after the Babylonian exile. Non-Jewish groups claiming descent. 1. Pashtuns of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Some Pashtun tribes trace their lineage to the lost tribes, specifically to the tribe of Ephraim. 1. Pashtun oral traditions and certain customs, like circumcision and strict codes of honor, are often cited as evidence. 1. Though largely Muslim today, the Pashtuns' connection to the lost tribes has intrigued scholars and religious figures. 1. Igbo of Nigeria. The Igbo claim descent from the tribes of Gad, Zebulun, and other Israelite tribes. 1. Many Igbo practice aspects of Judaism, though they are not formally recognized as Jewish by Israel. 1. Their cultural and spiritual practices include observing a form of the Sabbath and dietary restrictions similar to kosher laws. 1. Japanese theories. Some theories propose that Japan has ties to the lost tribes, with purported similarities between ancient Shinto rituals and certain biblical practices. 1. Although largely speculative, these theories capture the imagination and reflect a broader trend of cultural identification with the tribes. The 10 Lost Tribes in Folklore and Legend. Exploring folklore. This section discusses how legends about the lost tribes developed in Jewish and global cultural traditions, offering insights into the mythical dimension of the lost tribes narrative. The myth of the Sambatyon River. 1. Description of the river. Jewish legend describes the Sambatyon as a mysterious, mythical river that marks the boundary where the lost tribes reside. 1. According to tradition, the river ceases to flow only on the Sabbath, making it impossible for the tribes to cross. 1. Historical references. The Sambatyon is mentioned in Talmudic literature, medieval Jewish writings, and travelers' accounts. 1. Notably, Rashi and Maimonides reference the river, considering it a part of Jewish esoteric thought. 1. Symbolism and mysticism. The river represents both physical separation and a spiritual barrier, embodying themes of exile and the hope for reunion. 1. The Sambatyon is often seen as a metaphor for the challenges of reconnection with the lost members of the Israelite nation. Legends of remote tribes in Asia and Africa. 1. Middle Ages accounts. During the medieval period, Jewish travelers like Benjamin of Tudela wrote about distant Jewish communities, fueling the idea that the lost tribes lived in mysterious, unreachable lands. 1. Africa and Asia as lost tribe destinations. Theories emerged that place the lost tribes in Ethiopia, Yemen, Persia, and beyond. 1. These narratives inspired exploration and spiritual journeys, blending fact and fiction in the search for kin. 1. Moses of Crete and Messianic movements. In the 5th century CE, a messianic figure known as Moses of Crete led followers in a failed attempt to reach the Promised Land, reflecting an enduring belief in the rediscovery of the lost tribes. 1. Similar movements arose, reinforcing the spiritual and political appeal of such legends. European encounters and discovery myths. 1. Age of exploration. European explorers and missionaries often connected indigenous groups in the Americas and Africa to the lost tribes, seeing evidence in cultural practices, physical appearance, and language similarities. 1. Prester John myth. The legend of a Christian king ruling over a lost community of Israelites, often believed to be in Africa or Asia, captivated European imaginations. 1. This notion blended religious hope with colonial aspirations, giving rise to numerous expeditions and myths about hidden Jewish kingdoms. Theories of scattered descendants around the world. This section covers specific theories about the global locations and identities of the lost tribes, examining the cultural, linguistic, and historical arguments that have been presented to support these claims. Traces of the lost tribes in Africa. 1. Lemba of Zimbabwe and South Africa. The Lemba people, who practice customs similar to Jewish traditions, have been suggested to be descendants of the lost tribes. 1. Genetic studies have revealed some markers associated with the Middle Eastern population, sparking significant interest. 1. Beta Israel and Phalasha. Though often associated with the tribe of Dan, the Beta Israel community's ancient connection to Israel has led to further speculation that they may represent some of the lost tribes. Tribes and clans in Asia with possible connections. 1. Kashmiri theories. Some scholars suggest that the Kashmir Valley's inhabitants have Israelite roots, citing cultural practices and even linguistic similarities. 1. Though widely debated, Kashmiri oral traditions link them to the lost tribes. 1. Burma, Thailand, and Southeast Asia. Various ethnic groups, such as the Karen and Shan, have myths of Israelite origins, often linked to missionaries' accounts and local legends that reinforce these beliefs. The Americas and indigenous tribes. 1. Early colonial claims. Spanish and Portuguese explorers often interpreted indigenous cultures through a biblical lens, sometimes identifying Native Americans as lost tribe descendants. 1. This theory was fueled by the desire to integrate the Americas into a biblical framework. 1. Mormon beliefs. In the 19th century, the Mormon Church adopted the belief that Native American tribes might be descended from ancient Israelite populations, a notion central to early Mormon theology. European and British Israelite movements. 1. British Israelism. This theory posits that Anglo-Saxons are descended from the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. 1. Rooted in 19th century British nationalism, British Israelism influenced various political ideologies, including imperialist thought and religious nationalism in both the UK and the US. 1. Influence on American ideologies. Some American groups adopted British Israelism, linking their identity to the lost tribes in a manner that aligned with manifest destiny and other expansionist ideologies. Examining the British Israel theory, this section explores British Israelism in depth, analyzing its origins, cultural impact, and lasting legacy, particularly in the English-speaking world. Origins and popularity of British Israelism. 1. Foundations in Victorian Britain. British Israelism emerged in Victorian England, combining biblical prophecy with nationalist sentiment. 1. Figures like Edward Hine and John Wilson were influential in developing the theory, using linguistic similarities between Hebrew and English as evidence. 1. Religious justifications. British Israelism asserted that British, and later American, people had a divine mission based on their Israelite heritage, a belief that resonated with Protestant groups interpreting biblical prophecy through an Anglo-centric lens. Cultural and political influence. 1. Linked to British imperialism, the theory reinforced ideas of British superiority and justified colonial expansion as part of a divine plan. 1. Supporters believed that Britain's global power was part of God's covenant with Israel. 1. Adoption in the United States. British Israelism found a following among American Protestant groups, leading to movements that viewed the U.S. as a continuation of God's chosen people. 1. This belief influenced some early American settlers and contributed to the sense of manifest destiny. Criticisms and decline of British Israelism. 1. Debunking of linguistic claims. Linguists and historians refuted British Israelism by exposing its flawed methodology, particularly the linguistic connections it purported between English and Hebrew. 1. Legacy and modern perception. Although British Israelism has largely declined, its influence lingers in some religious groups and has shaped nationalist narratives. 1. Its ideas also persist in certain fringe Christian identity groups. Modern religious groups and their interest in the lost tribes. Many contemporary religious movements incorporate the lost tribes narrative into their beliefs, seeing the tribes as a part of their spiritual mission or destiny. Mormon beliefs and the lost tribes. 1. LDS doctrine. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church, believes that they are spiritually connected to the tribes of Israel, with some members tracing their lineage to the lost tribes. 1. LDS scriptures, including the Book of Mormon, present Native Americans as descendants of ancient Israelite populations. 1. Influence on Mormon eschatology. The lost tribes are a central element in LDS end times beliefs, with some members anticipating a literal return of the tribes as part of God's plan. Messianic Jewish movements. 1. Interest in tribal identity. Messianic Jews often incorporate ideas about the lost tribes, seeing them as part of the broader Jewish diaspora. 1. Some groups have made efforts to connect with communities claiming Israelite descent, particularly in Asia and Africa. 1. Theological significance. The return of the lost tribes is viewed as a step toward fulfilling messianic prophecy and global unity in faith. Evangelical Christian and Restorationist views. 1. Christian eschatology and the lost tribes. Many evangelical Christians believe that the lost tribes return as a precursor to the second coming. 1. This belief influences some evangelical support for Israel and the idea of reconnecting Jewish people from around the world. 1. Restorationist movements. Some Christian groups actively seek to gather and support communities claiming Israelite heritage as part of their faith mission. DNA testing and the search for genetic evidence. This section addresses the role of modern genetics in investigating claims of lost tribe descent and how science intersects with cultural identity. Advances in genetic testing. 1. Challenges of DNA identification. While some genetic markers are more common among Jewish populations, tracing specific tribal origins remains difficult due to the lack of precise genetic markers for ancient Israelite tribes. 1. Case studies. The Lemba, B'nai Manasseh, and Beta Israel communities have undergone genetic testing, with some results showing Middle Eastern ancestry. 1. However, these findings are often debated and cannot conclusively determine tribal lineage. Implications of genetic discoveries. 1. Reinforcing or challenging identity. For some groups, genetic results affirm long-held beliefs, while for others, they create new questions. 1. DNA evidence plays a complex role in both validating and complicating cultural identities tied to the lost tribes. 1. Ongoing research and ethical considerations. As genetic research advances, questions about identity, authenticity, and heritage continue to shape the discussion around the lost tribes, raising ethical concerns about identity verification. The Lost Tribes in Modern Cultural Narratives. This section explores how the Lost Tribes story has evolved in contemporary culture, touching on its portrayal in media, literature, and popular imagination. This narrative provides a bridge between ancient history and modern identity, showing how the myth of the Lost Tribes continues to resonate. The Lost Tribes in popular media. 1. Films and documentaries. The Lost Tribes mystery has inspired numerous films, documentaries, and television series. 1. Often, these portrayals focus on the themes of discovery, exile, and reunion. 1. Documentaries like Quest for the Lost Tribes by Simha Yakubovich bring audiences to remote parts of the world, exploring claims of ancient Israelite ancestry with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. 1. Literature and historical fiction. The mystery of the Lost Tribes has also inspired numerous novels, especially in the historical and adventure genres. 1. Books like The Lost Tribes by Christine Taylor Butler blend historical myth with modern-day intrigue, often casting the search for the tribes as a quest to reclaim lost heritage. The Lost Tribes in Art and Symbolism. 1. Artistic representations. The Lost Tribes appear as powerful symbols in visual arts, often depicted as wandering figures or mystical presences. 1. Some artists have used the theme of the Lost Tribes to reflect on themes of diaspora, loss, and identity, blending Jewish iconography with global influences. 1. Symbolism in religious art. Artistic depictions of the Lost Tribes can also be found in religious art, representing the tribes as a symbol of faithfulness, endurance, and the longing for unity. 1. These depictions are particularly prevalent in synagogues and religious publications, where they are used to inspire reflection on unity and hope. The Lost Tribes and Globalization. 1. Global networks and identity formation. In an increasingly connected world, communities claiming Israelite heritage have found solidarity and support online. 1. Social media and international organizations now connect the B'nai Menashe, Lemba, and Igbo with both Jewish and Christian communities worldwide. 1. Rediscovery and identity in a globalized era. The search for the Lost Tribes resonates with modern themes of rediscovery, belonging, and self-identification. 1. For many individuals and groups, identifying as part of the Lost Tribes has become a way to assert a unique cultural identity within a global framework. Academic perspectives on the Lost Tribes mythology. This section delves into how scholars from different fields, history, anthropology, religious studies, and genetics, view the Lost Tribes myth. Academic scrutiny adds depth to understanding the enduring appeal and historical basis for these narratives. Historical perspectives. 1. Exile and dispersion. Historians generally agree that the Assyrian conquest led to the dispersion of the northern tribes. 1. However, given the lack of concrete records of the tribes after exile, the historical timeline after their removal from Israel becomes speculative. 1. Academic consensus generally views the Lost Tribes as either assimilated into local populations or dispersed in ways that make tracing their exact lineage nearly impossible. 1. Cultural influence and survival. Some historians suggest that, even if the tribes disappeared, aspects of their culture and identity may have influenced neighboring communities, particularly in the regions they were exiled to. 1. By this interpretation, the tribes lived on through cultural diffusion rather than direct lineage. Anthropological and sociological interpretations. 1. Symbolism of the Lost Tribes. Anthropologists and sociologists often study the Lost Tribes through their symbolic meaning. 1. These scholars see the Lost Tribes as representations of the diaspora experience, reflecting themes of exile, resilience, and the human need to connect with one's origins. 1. Identity formation and the Lost Tribes narrative. The Lost Tribes myth has served as a foundation for identity in many groups. 1. Sociologists study how this identification with the Lost Tribes can provide a sense of belonging, spirituality, and connection for communities otherwise marginalized or disconnected from the mainstream. Genetic research and its role in debunking or supporting claims. 1. Challenges in genetic evidence. Geneticists warn that, despite advances, it is difficult to verify claims of Lost Tribe descent with certainty. 1. Ancient Israelite populations are challenging to trace due to the lack of specific genetic markers uniquely tied to the Lost Tribes. 1. Case studies and genetic markers. Studies on the Lemba, B'nai Menashe, and other groups have revealed some genetic markers associated with Middle Eastern populations. 1. Although these findings are not definitive proof of descent from the Lost Tribes, they have been seen as culturally validating for some groups. Religious studies and the theological significance of the Lost Tribes. 1. Messianic expectations. For many religious communities, especially within Judaism and Christianity, the lost tribes represent a prophetic symbol of the Messianic age. 1. Religious studies scholars examine how the belief in the return of the lost tribes influences interpretations of end times prophecy and eschatology. 1. Mystical and esoteric views. Some Jewish and Christian mystics view the lost tribes as symbolic of spiritual aspects of the soul or the divine nation. 1. In these interpretations, the lost tribes are not physical peoples but rather metaphysical aspects of humanity waiting to be reintegrated. Socio-political dimensions of the lost tribes narrative. This section focuses on how the lost tribes narrative has been used for political purposes, both historically and in the present day, exploring how groups have leveraged the myth to serve various agendas. Imperialism and the lost tribes. 1. Colonial narratives. During the age of exploration, European explorers often claimed that indigenous groups were the lost tribes, using this belief to justify colonialism as a form of reclaiming lost Israelites. 1. This narrative was especially prevalent among Spanish and Portuguese explorers in the Americas. 1. Biblical justification for expansion. Colonial powers used the lost tribes myth to provide a biblical basis for exploration and conquest, suggesting that the indigenous populations they encountered were a fulfillment of prophecy. 1. This idea lent spiritual legitimacy to otherwise secular political goals. Modern political movements. 1. Zionist implications. The lost tribes narrative has played a role in Zionism, particularly in supporting the idea that Jewish communities worldwide are part of a larger Israelite family. 1. This belief has been used to bolster the idea of ingathering Jews from the diaspora. 1. Political movements among descendant claims. For communities like the Igbo in Nigeria or the B'nai Menashe in India, claiming descent from the lost tribes has had political significance, sometimes enabling greater cultural preservation or international support. 1. Some groups have sought Israeli recognition, which brings political and social benefits, including immigration rights. Cultural preservation and national identity. 1. Reclaiming lost heritage. For groups claiming Israelite descent, the lost tribes narrative offers a way to assert cultural uniqueness within larger national contexts. 1. This is particularly important for groups in post-colonial societies, where such claims can enhance cultural pride and identity. 1. Diplomatic and intercultural exchange. Some countries with communities claiming lost tribe heritage have engaged in diplomatic and cultural exchanges with Israel, forging international ties that are often framed as reunions of lost kin. The enduring legacy and the future of the lost tribes myth. This final section reflects on the lasting legacy of the lost tribes narrative and its likely future in a world shaped by globalization, cultural exchange, and technological advancements. Revival of interest in the digital age. 1. Social media and online communities. With the rise of the internet, groups claiming lost tribe heritage now have a platform to connect globally. 1. Websites, forums, and social media allow these groups to share their stories, celebrate their heritage, and seek wider recognition. 1. Crowdsourced research and amateur archaeology. The internet has democratized historical research, with amateur historians and archaeologists contributing to theories and discoveries. 1. This public interest keeps the lost tribes myth alive and evolving. The role of genetic technology in future claims. 1. Expanding genetic databases. As genetic databases grow, individuals and groups are likely to continue exploring their heritage through DNA testing. 1. Advances in genetic research may provide more concrete evidence for or against some lost tribe claims, shaping the narrative for future generations. 1. Ethical and cultural concerns. The use of genetic technology to verify lineage can also raise ethical questions, as individuals may feel pressured to prove their identity. 1. This could affect communities that have long relied on oral traditions and cultural practices to define their Israelite heritage. The lost tribes as a cultural and spiritual metaphor. 1. Symbol of global exile and reunion. Beyond the search for literal descendants, the lost tribes narrative serves as a powerful metaphor for people around the world who feel disconnected from their roots. 1. It speaks to universal themes of exile, identity, and the desire to belong. 1. Inspiration for cultural unity. As a concept, the lost tribes offer a narrative of reconciliation and reunion. 1. For many, the notion of tribes reuniting after centuries of separation reflects hopes for peace and unity, a sentiment that resonates deeply in a divided world. Future research and interfaith dialogue. 1. Bridging religions and cultures. The enduring fascination with the lost tribes provides a platform for interfaith dialogue and multicultural understanding. 1. As researchers, religious leaders, and lay people continue to explore these ancient mysteries, they create opportunities for communities of all backgrounds to share and celebrate their unique traditions. 1. Ongoing impact of the lost tribes on identity. The story of the lost tribes is unlikely to lose its appeal, as it addresses fundamental questions about human origin, belonging, and destiny. 1. As long as people seek to understand where they come from and where they are going, the mystery of the lost tribes will endure. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the like button. The Lost Tribes of Israel, Myths and Truths Revealed. Part 3 Archaeology and Genetics, Searching for the Lost Tribes. Part 3 will focus on scientific investigations into the lost tribes, analyzing archaeological evidence, genetic studies, and other empirical methods. This section will evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of scientific attempts to locate or identify the descendants of the lost tribes. Key sections: the search for material evidence. 1. Review of archaeological discoveries that may be linked to the Northern Kingdom's exiles. 2. Sites of interest, artifacts, and challenges in definitively linking findings to the lost tribes. DNA studies and genetic evidence. 1. Overview of genetic studies on various populations claiming descent from the lost tribes. 2. Analysis of what DNA evidence reveals and its limitations in tracing ancient lineages. Case studies in genetic anthropology. 1. The Beta Israel of Ethiopia, genetic evidence supporting or refuting their Jewish descent. 2. The Beni Israel of India, genetic markers and cultural practices suggesting a possible Israelite heritage. Limitations and challenges of archaeological and genetic studies. 1. Scientific challenges in proving continuity over millennia, especially with limited ancient samples. 2. Ethical considerations in genetic studies, particularly when dealing with identity and cultural heritage. Evaluating the scientific evidence against myths. 1. How scientific findings align with or contradict traditional myths. 2. The importance of distinguishing between historical records, oral traditions, and cultural affiliations. Future directions in the search. 1. New archaeological methods, for example, remote sensing, ancient DNA analysis, and their potential to uncover lost histories. 2. Predictions on how the search for the lost tribes may evolve with technology. The Assyrian conquest and the initial dispersion. The story of the lost tribes of Israel begins in the 8th century BCE with the Assyrian Empire's conquest of the northern kingdom of Israel. This section discusses the background of the Assyrian conquest, its impact on the Israelites, and the evidence for the initial dispersion of the tribes. The historical context of the Assyrian conquest. 1. Expansion of the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian Empire, under kings such as Tiglath-Pileser III, Shalmaneser V, and Sargon II, was expanding its territory aggressively in the 8th century BCE. 1. The northern kingdom of Israel, strategically located between Egypt and Mesopotamia, was a significant target due to its wealth and influence. 1. Conquest of Israel. In 722 BCE, after a prolonged siege, the Assyrian forces conquered Samaria, the capital of the Kingdom of Israel. 1. This marked the end of the kingdom and the beginning of the exile of the northern tribes. The fate of the northern tribes. 1. Assyrian policy of exile. The Assyrians practiced a policy of forced relocation for conquered peoples. 1. By dispersing the population, they weakened the potential for rebellion and controlled territories more effectively. 1. Biblical and historical accounts of the exile. According to the biblical account in the Book of Kings, the Israelites were exiled to Halah, Habor, the river of Gozan, and the cities of the Medes, 2 Kings 17:6. 1. These areas were located in present-day Iraq, Syria, and Iran. Archaeological evidence for the exile. 1. Assyrian records. Assyrian annals, including inscriptions and records from the reign of Sargon II, detail the conquests and deportations of Israelite populations. 1. These records indicate that the Assyrians took thousands of Israelites into exile. 1. Settlement patterns in exile regions. Archaeological excavations in areas like Halah and Gozan have revealed settlements and artifacts from the period of the Assyrian conquest. 1. However, it remains challenging to directly link these artifacts to Israelite exiles. Theories of dispersion and migration paths. Over centuries, various theories have emerged about where the lost tribes may have gone after their exile. These theories propose that the tribes migrated to regions as diverse as East Asia, Africa, and Europe. This section outlines the main hypotheses and the evidence, or lack thereof, supporting each. The Central Asian Theory. 1. Migration to Media and beyond. Some historians propose that the Israelites exiled by the Assyrians settled in Media, northwest Iran, intermarrying and blending with local populations. 1. Later migrations may have carried them further east. 1. Scythian and Cimmerian connections. Some theories suggest that descendants of the Israelites joined Scythian and Cimmerian nomads, who moved into Europe. 1. Proponents of this theory argue that the Scythians' mobile lifestyle enabled the dispersed tribes to spread widely across Central Asia. The Eastern Theory, Connections to Asia. 1. The Pashtun and B'nai Menashe communities. Among the Pashtun in Afghanistan and the B'nai Menashe in India, oral traditions maintain a link to the lost tribes. 1. Some scholars and geneticists have explored connections between these communities and Israelite heritage. 1. Historical evidence and debate. There is limited concrete evidence to support these claims, and most historical sources suggest that any such migration eastward would have been gradual and indirect. 1. However, the stories of Joseph or Moses are present in the oral traditions of some Asian tribes. The African Theory, Lemba and Beta Israel. 1. Claims of Israelite ancestry in Africa. The Lemba people of southern Africa and the Beta Israel community in Ethiopia both claim descent from ancient Israelites. 1. Oral traditions among these communities tell of migration from a land of Israelites. 1. Genetic evidence. Studies on the Lemba have found genetic markers associated with the Jewish priesthood, the Kohanim, which suggests a possible ancient link to Israel. 1. However, genetic markers alone cannot definitively establish lineage from the lost tribes. The European Theory, British Israelism. 1. Origins of British Israelism. British Israelism is the belief that the lost tribes migrated to Europe, specifically to the British Isles, becoming ancestors of the Anglo-Saxon and Celtic people. 1. This theory gained popularity in the 19th and early 20th centuries. 1. Cultural and historical claims. Proponents of British Israelism cite linguistic similarities, symbols, and supposed ancestral connections. 1. However, most mainstream historians reject these claims due to a lack of archaeological or genetic evidence. The role of oral tradition in preserving identity. This section examines how oral traditions have played a crucial role in preserving the identity of groups claiming descent from the lost tribes. These traditions often include migration stories, genealogies, and cultural practices that link communities to ancient Israel. Oral histories and storytelling traditions. 1. Transmission across generations. Many communities, including the Igbo in Nigeria, the B'nai Menashe in India, and the Pashtuns in Afghanistan, have maintained oral traditions linking them to the lost tribes. 1. These traditions have been passed down through generations, often serving as the primary means of preserving identity. 1. Oral tradition as cultural anchor. For communities with limited historical documentation, oral traditions act as a cultural anchor, providing a sense of belonging and connection to a shared heritage. Migration myths and ancestral tales. 1. Common elements in migration stories. Many communities claiming Israelite descent have similar themes in their oral histories: an ancient homeland, exile, a difficult journey, and eventual settlement. 1. These stories reflect shared experiences of displacement and survival. 1. Role in identity and belonging. For some, these migration stories are not just historical accounts but spiritual narratives that affirm their connection to Israel. 1. This is particularly evident among the Lemba and Igbo, where ancestral tales have reinforced a sense of collective identity. Challenges of oral tradition in historical verification. 1. Limitations of oral accounts. While oral traditions provide valuable insights, they can also change over time, blending myth with history. 1. Scholars often approach these narratives with caution, seeking corroborating evidence to establish historical accuracy. 1. Intersection with modern identity. For many communities, oral traditions are as important as written records in shaping cultural identity. 1. Despite historical uncertainties, these stories have helped sustain the belief in Israelite heritage across centuries. Section 4. Archaeological evidence and interpretations. Archaeology has long sought to shed light on the fate of the lost tribes, but the lack of concrete evidence has left the subject largely speculative. This section explores archaeological attempts to uncover the history of the lost tribes and the challenges inherent in this search. Archaeological sites associated with Israelite exile. 1. Sites in Assyria and Media. Archaeologists have discovered sites in the former Assyrian Empire with artifacts indicating that Israelite populations once lived there. 1. These findings include pottery, inscriptions, and tools that match Israelite styles. 1. Challenges of identifying Israelite remains. Distinguishing Israelite artifacts from those of neighboring cultures can be difficult, especially in areas where different groups coexisted. 1. The intermixing of cultural influences complicates efforts to identify specific Israelite remains. Claims of ancient Israelite settlements in Asia. 1. Central Asian excavations. Some archaeologists have examined sites in Central Asia, exploring the theory that Israelite exiles may have settled there. 1. However, the findings are often inconclusive, as the artifacts generally reflect the diverse cultures of the Silk Road rather than a distinct Israelite presence. 1. Bactria and the Kushan Empire. Some suggest that the Israelites may have influenced or assimilated into the Kushan Empire, an ancient Central Asian civilization. 1. However, evidence for this remains speculative and mostly based on cultural interpretations rather than direct archaeological findings. Excavations in Africa and the claims of the Lemba and Beta Israel. 1. Lemba and ancient artifacts. Archaeological findings among the Lemba have revealed artifacts, including ancient coinage and religious items, that bear similarities to Middle Eastern traditions. 1. While these discoveries are intriguing, they are not definitive proof of Israelite descent. 1. Beta Israel and Ethiopian archaeology. The Beta Israel community in Ethiopia has distinct religious and cultural practices linked to ancient Israel. 1. Archaeological sites in Ethiopia reveal evidence of long-standing Jewish influence, though it is unclear if this is directly connected to the lost tribes. Linguistic studies and cultural parallels. Linguistics and cultural studies provide another avenue for exploring the possible dispersion of the lost tribes. This section discusses linguistic patterns, cultural parallels, and ritual practices among communities claiming Israelite heritage. Linguistic traces and language similarities. 1. Hebrew influence in African and Asian languages. Among the Lemba, some linguists have identified Hebrew words in traditional language usage. 1. Similarly, the B'nai Menashe language contains terms and phrases that appear to be derived from Hebrew or Aramaic. 1. Debates on linguistic evidence. Linguistic evidence is complex, as languages often borrow words across cultures. 1. Scholars caution that linguistic similarities alone are insufficient to confirm a direct link to ancient Israel. Shared cultural practices and rituals. 1. Dietary laws and circumcision. Some communities, such as the Lemba and Beta Israel, follow dietary laws similar to kosher rules and practice circumcision, both of which are associated with Jewish tradition. 1. These practices are viewed by some as evidence of Israelite descent. 1. Festivals and ritual observances. Observance of festivals resembling Jewish holidays, such as Passover-like rituals, has been noted among groups like the Igbo. 1. These practices support the claim of a historical connection but do not conclusively prove ancestry. Artifacts and symbolic parallels. 1. Religious symbols and artifacts. Some artifacts, such as the Lemba's religious symbols and altars, show parallels to ancient Israelite religious symbols. 1. For example, the Lemba's use of the Star of David and certain ceremonial items has led to comparisons with ancient Israelite practices. 1. Interpretations of parallels. Scholars debate whether these parallels are the result of cultural transmission or independent development. 1. Similarities in religious symbols and artifacts can arise across cultures without a direct ancestral connection. Historical reinterpretations and evolving perspectives. In recent centuries, scholars, theologians, and historians have revisited the story of the lost tribes, with each generation bringing new interpretations. This section explores how these reinterpretations shape contemporary views on the lost tribes, showing how perspectives evolve based on cultural, religious, and ideological shifts. Early modern interpretations and European colonization. 1. Colonial influence on lost tribes narratives. During the Age of Exploration, European colonizers saw the story of the lost tribes as a potential justification for exploring new lands. 1. They were particularly interested in claims that the indigenous populations of the Americas, Asia, and Africa could be descended from ancient Israelites. 1. This interpretation was popular among missionaries who believed that finding the lost tribes would fulfill a biblical prophecy. 1. Impact on indigenous populations. By labeling indigenous groups as lost Israelites, European powers sometimes use the lost tribes narrative to impose cultural and religious assimilation. 1. While often intended as a form of validation, these claims sometimes led to the erasure of indigenous identities as missionaries and colonialists sought to reclaim these populations for Christianity. 19th and 20th century reinterpretations, British Israelism and Afrocentrism. 1. British Israelism. In the 19th century, the British Israelism movement emerged, claiming that the British, and sometimes other European peoples, were descended from the lost tribes. 1. This belief posited that Anglo-Saxon people were the true inheritors of Israelite heritage, drawing on supposed linguistic and cultural similarities. 1. Despite being discredited by historians, British Israelism influenced certain nationalist movements. 1. Afrocentric interpretations. In the 20th century, some African and African-descended communities in the Americas began to interpret the Lost Tribes story through an Afrocentric lens. 1. The Rastafarian movement, for example, viewed Ethiopia as the true Zion and regarded certain African ethnic groups as descendants of ancient Israelites. 1. For these communities, identifying with the Lost Tribes became a means of reclaiming cultural pride and autonomy from Western narratives. Modern scholarship and the evolution of theory. 1. Reassessment of ancient sources. Scholars continue to revisit ancient texts and Assyrian records, interpreting them through updated linguistic, archaeological, and historical frameworks. 1. By reanalyzing Assyrian and Babylonian records, historians hope to clarify the movements and fates of the northern tribes. 1. Integration of science and theology. With the advent of genetic testing, some researchers have attempted to reconcile scientific evidence with theological perspectives on the lost tribes. 1. While religious scholars generally focus on the symbolic meaning of the tribe's dispersion, the use of scientific methods has sparked debate about the limits of genetics in proving or disproving cultural and historical claims. Myth versus history, contemporary debate. 1. Symbolic interpretations. Many contemporary theologians argue that the lost tribes serve as a powerful symbol rather than a literal historical reality. 1. They interpret the story of the tribes as a metaphor for human exile, identity, and spiritual connection. 1. Academic skepticism. Historians remain largely skeptical of many claims surrounding the lost tribes, viewing them as folk narratives rather than verifiable historical fact. 1. Academics often focus on how these narratives serve cultural and religious purposes within different communities rather than seeking to prove their historical accuracy. The ongoing search for the lost tribes. Despite centuries of investigation, the search for the lost tribes continues today with renewed interest and new methods. This section explores the contemporary search efforts, including scientific, religious, and grassroots initiatives, and considers why the search for the lost tribes persists in the modern era. Modern scientific methods, genetics and DNA testing. 1. Advances in genetic research. With genetic technology becoming more sophisticated, researchers have conducted DNA tests on groups claiming Israelite ancestry. 1. Projects involving the Lemba, B'nai Menashe, and other communities have yielded some genetic markers that suggest ancient connections to the Middle East. 1. Challenges of genetic testing. While genetics provides a fascinating tool for tracing ancestry, it has limitations when it comes to identifying ancient populations. 1. The Israelite diaspora is difficult to distinguish genetically due to centuries of intermarriage and assimilation, and genetic evidence alone cannot confirm lineage with absolute certainty. Religious movements and the return to Israel. 1. Aliyah of lost tribes. In Israel, the government has recognized certain groups, such as the B'nai Menashe from India, as part of the global Jewish community, enabling them to make Aliyah, or immigration to Israel. 1. This recognition allows members of these communities to settle in Israel as Jews, fulfilling what some see as a biblical prophecy of ingathering. 1. Messianic and prophetic interpretations. Many Jewish and Christian groups view the search for the lost tribes as part of messianic prophecy. 1. In Judaism, the return of the tribes is seen as a sign of the coming of the Messiah, while in some Christian circles, it is tied to beliefs about the second coming. Grassroots movements and community recognition. 1. Efforts to preserve culture and traditions. In communities like the Igbo in Nigeria and the Lemba in southern Africa, grassroots movements have emerged to preserve and celebrate their claimed Israelite heritage. 1. This includes preserving religious practices, documenting oral histories, and connecting with the wider Jewish world. 1. Global support networks. Many organizations support these communities in gaining recognition for their cultural heritage, often providing resources to help them research, preserve, and advocate for their history. 1. Jewish organizations have built bridges with communities across Africa, Asia, and the Americas that claim Israelite descent, creating intercultural exchange and solidarity. Exploration and archaeological expeditions. 1. New expeditions to Central Asia and Africa. Explorers and researchers continue to visit regions thought to hold Israelite descendants, such as Central Asia, Afghanistan, and Ethiopia. 1. Although there have been few definitive discoveries, the search itself has created cross-cultural exchanges and increased interest in ancient connections. 1. The role of amateurs and enthusiasts. In addition to professional archaeologists, amateur historians and enthusiasts play a significant role in the ongoing search. 1. Online forums, social media, and crowdfunding have enabled independent researchers to pursue their own investigations, sometimes discovering valuable insights or artifacts. The enduring appeal of the Lost Tribes search. 1. Symbolism in the search. The quest for the lost tribes resonates deeply, symbolizing humanity's search for identity, origin, and connection to the past. 1. For many, the search is about more than discovering literal descendants. It is about finding unity in the human story and exploring how ancient histories continue to shape modern identities. 1. Cultural resilience and the power of myth. The Lost Tribes narrative endures in part because it taps into universal themes of displacement and the hope for reunion. 1. Whether viewed as myth, history, or prophecy, the story of the Lost Tribes holds a powerful place in world culture, inspiring communities worldwide to connect with a shared sense of history. Future prospects for research and recognition. 1. Potential for technological advances. Advances in fields like genomics, archaeology, and historical linguistics may one day offer new insights into the history of the Lost Tribes. 1. As our understanding of ancient DNA improves, it could reveal more about migration patterns from the Middle East, potentially shedding light on ancient populations. 1. Ethics and cultural sensitivity. The search for the Lost Tribes must also be balanced with ethical considerations, particularly in respecting the cultural identities and beliefs of groups that claim Israelite descent. 1. Future research should prioritize inclusivity and respect for the ways in which these communities define their own heritage.
Please subscribe to this channel. Thank you.
In the final part, we'll explore how the concept of the Lost Tribes impacts culture, politics, and religion today. This section examines the contemporary implications of Lost Tribes narratives in Israel, the diaspora, and beyond. Key sections: the Lost Tribes and modern Israeli society. 1. The influence of Lost Tribes narratives on immigration policies, particularly in regard to groups like the B'nai Menashe from India. 2. Political and social impacts of recognizing or denying groups based on claims of descent. Global identity and the appeal of ancient lineage. 1. How identity and a sense of belonging are reinforced by the idea of ancient lineage. 2. The role of the Lost Tribes in forming a bridge between Jewish communities and various ethnic groups worldwide. Religious and interfaith dialogue. 1. The impact of the Lost Tribes concept on interfaith dialogue between Jewish, Christian, and other communities. 2. How shared narratives of the Lost Tribes are used to build connections between diverse religious communities. The Lost Tribes in popular culture and media. 1. Representation of the Lost Tribes in books, movies, and television, from historical fiction to documentaries. 2. Analysis of how these portrayals influence public understanding and perpetuate myths. Political implications of Lost Tribes recognition. 1. How the recognition of Lost Tribe claims influences international relations, particularly with nations that host groups claiming Israelite heritage. 2. Tensions and alliances forged over the recognition or denial of these identities. Conclusion: the enduring legacy of the Lost Tribes. 1. Reflection on why the Lost Tribes continue to captivate human imagination. 2. The role of this mystery in shaping Jewish identity and its broader influence on global culture. 3. Final thoughts on the balance between myth, faith, and science in the ongoing quest to understand the fate of the Lost Tribes. The Lost Tribes and identity formation. The narrative of the Lost Tribes of Israel plays a significant role in the identity formation of various communities claiming descent from these tribes. This section explores how the mythology surrounding the Lost Tribes informs cultural identities, personal narratives, and collective memories. Identity among claiming communities. 1. Affirmation of heritage. For many groups claiming descent from the Lost Tribes, the narrative affirms their unique cultural heritage and provides a sense of belonging. 1. This can be seen among the Lemba in southern Africa and the B'nai Menashe in India, where connecting with the Lost Tribes serves to reinforce their historical and cultural claims. 1. Cultural pride and resilience. In regions with a history of colonization or marginalization, identifying as descendants of the Lost Tribes can be a source of pride. 1. This identity provides resilience against cultural erasure and promotes a sense of agency in reclaiming their historical narrative. Personal narratives and spiritual journeys. 1. Individual search for ancestry. Many individuals within these communities engage in personal journeys to discover their ancestry, often resulting in profound spiritual awakenings. 1. This process may involve genealogical research, participation in rituals, and connecting with broader diasporic networks. 1. Storytelling as a form of identity. The act of sharing personal stories about their connection to the lost tribes becomes a powerful way for individuals to assert their identity. 1. These narratives are often infused with elements of faith, spirituality, and cultural practices that contribute to a broader sense of community. The role of education and cultural transmission. 1. Educational initiatives. Many communities actively work to educate younger generations about their ancestral connections, ensuring that the narrative of the lost tribes is passed down. 1. This education often includes cultural practices, language, and historical stories that help maintain their heritage. 1. Cultural festivals and events. Celebrating cultural festivals that emphasize the identity of the lost tribes helps solidify community bonds. 1. These events often involve traditional music, dance, food, and storytelling, serving as a space for cultural affirmation and transmission. The lost tribes in religious and spiritual contexts. The search for the lost tribes also carries significant religious implications, particularly within Jewish and Christian traditions. This section explores how these narratives have been integrated into religious beliefs and practices. Jewish perspectives on the lost tribes. 1. Messianic beliefs. Within Jewish eschatology, the return of the lost tribes is often linked to messianic expectations. 1. Many Jews believe that the reconstitution of the tribes will occur during the Messianic age, serving as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. 1. Cultural revitalization. Jewish communities worldwide have engaged with the narrative of the lost tribes as a means of cultural revitalization. 1. The idea that Jewish heritage extends beyond traditional boundaries encourages inclusivity and the recognition of diverse Jewish identities. Christian interpretations and missions. 1. Christian Zionism. Some Christian groups, particularly in the United States, view the search for the lost tribes through the lens of Christian Zionism. 1. They believe that recognizing and supporting the return of these tribes to Israel is part of fulfilling biblical prophecies regarding the Second Coming. 1. Proselytization efforts. For some missionaries, identifying groups as descendants of the lost tribes provides an avenue for evangelism. 1. They often see these communities as ripe for conversion, viewing the narrative as an opportunity to engage with people who might be spiritually aligned with biblical heritage. Syncretism and spiritual practices. 1. Interweaving of traditions. Some communities incorporate elements from their indigenous beliefs and practices alongside their claims of Israelite ancestry. 1. This syncretism can result in unique expressions of faith that blend traditional customs with elements of Judaism or Christianity. 1. Spiritual pilgrimage. Many groups see pilgrimage to Israel as a sacred journey, often aligning their travels with historical narratives of the lost tribes. 1. These spiritual journeys allow them to connect with their claimed heritage and seek divine favor through their historical ties. The lost tribes and cultural expressions. The narrative of the lost tribes has permeated various cultural expressions, influencing art, literature, and music. This section examines how the stories and themes associated with the lost tribes have manifested in creative forms. Literary representations. 1. Historical novels and nonfiction. The Lost Tribes narrative has inspired numerous literary works, both historical fiction and nonfiction. 1. These works often explore themes of exile, identity, and the search for belonging, capturing the imagination of readers who resonate with the quest for heritage. 1. Scholarly contributions. Academic studies analyzing the lost tribes have produced a wealth of literature that delves into historical, linguistic, and cultural dimensions. 1. These works contribute to a deeper understanding of the tribe's significance within a broader context of diaspora studies. Artistic representations. 1. Visual arts. Artists have drawn inspiration from the lost tribes narrative, creating works that reflect themes of displacement, identity, and cultural heritage. 1. Paintings, sculptures, and installations often depict symbolic representations of the tribe's journeys or invoke imagery from their historical context. 1. Performance art and theater. Theatrical performances and dance pieces inspired by the Lost Tribes narratives engage audiences in storytelling, allowing for a deeper emotional connection to the themes of loss and rediscovery. 1. These performances can serve as powerful platforms for cultural expression and dialogue. Musical traditions. 1. Fusion of musical styles. Musicians claiming heritage from the Lost Tribes often incorporate traditional instruments and musical styles into contemporary genres. 1. This fusion reflects the dynamic nature of identity and cultural continuity, showcasing how ancient narratives inform modern expressions. 1. Lyrics and themes. Songwriters frequently draw on the themes of the Lost Tribes in their lyrics, exploring topics such as longing, exile, and hope. 1. This music becomes a vehicle for expressing personal and collective experiences of searching for identity. Interfaith dialogue and global connections. The story of the Lost Tribes fosters interfaith dialogue and cultural exchanges, allowing diverse communities to engage in discussions about shared histories and beliefs. This section examines how the Lost Tribes narrative can promote understanding and collaboration across different faiths and cultures. Interfaith collaborations. 1. Dialogue initiatives. Various organizations and religious groups have initiated interfaith dialogues centered on the narratives of the Lost Tribes. 1. These discussions encourage participants to explore common themes of faith, identity, and the human experience, fostering respect and understanding. 1. Cultural exchange programs. Cultural exchange programs that focus on the Lost Tribes allow participants to share traditions, rituals, and practices. 1. Such initiatives not only build bridges between communities but also promote appreciation for diversity within the shared narrative. Global awareness and education. 1. Educational programs. Schools and universities have incorporated the stories of the Lost Tribes into curricula focused on multicultural education and global history. 1. By exploring the complexities of these narratives, students gain insights into the rich tapestry of human experience. 1. Public awareness campaigns. Advocacy groups work to raise awareness of the histories and cultures of communities claiming descent from the Lost Tribes. 1. Campaigns highlight the importance of recognizing and valuing these narratives, promoting a more inclusive understanding of history. Modern-day applications and advocacy. 1. Social justice movements. The narratives of the Lost Tribes resonate with contemporary social justice movements that emphasize marginalized voices and cultural recognition. 1. Advocates leverage these stories to call for the rights and recognition of indigenous and diasporic communities. 1. Unity and diversity. The story of the Lost Tribes serves as a reminder of the shared humanity that transcends cultural boundaries. 1. By recognizing the complexities of these narratives, individuals and communities can come together in solidarity, celebrating both their unique identities and their interconnectedness. The enduring legacy of the Lost Tribes narrative. The narrative of the Lost Tribes has had a profound and lasting impact on cultural, religious, and social landscapes around the world. This section explores the ongoing legacy of the Lost Tribes story and its implications for the future. Continued exploration and scholarship. 1. Research and discovery. As interest in the Lost Tribes persists, scholars and researchers continue to explore historical records, archaeological sites, and oral traditions. 1. New discoveries and interpretations keep the narrative alive and evolving, contributing to our understanding of human migration and identity. 1. Interdisciplinary approaches. The study of the Lost Tribes draws on various academic disciplines, including history, anthropology, genetics, and theology. 1. This interdisciplinary approach enriches the narrative, offering multiple perspectives on the tribe's significance. Cultural revitalization and global citizenship. 1. Revival of ancestral practices. Many communities continue to revitalize their cultural practices in light of their claimed Israelite heritage. 1. This revival fosters a sense of pride and belonging, connecting individuals to their ancestors and histories. 1. Global citizenship and solidarity. The narrative of the Lost Tribes highlights the interconnectedness of humanity. 1. As people navigate issues. The enduring legacy of the Lost Tribes narrative. Cultural revitalization and global citizenship. 1. Global citizenship and solidarity. The narrative of the Lost Tribes highlights the interconnectedness of humanity. 1. As people navigate issues of migration, displacement, and cultural identity in a rapidly globalizing world, the Lost Tribes story serves as a reminder of the shared human experience. 1. It encourages an understanding of global citizenship, emphasizing empathy and solidarity among diverse communities. 1. Many descendants of the lost tribes engage in activism that not only focuses on their heritage but also addresses broader social justice issues, advocating for the rights of marginalized populations. Inspiration for future generations. 1. Motivating the youth. The stories of the lost tribes inspire younger generations to explore their own histories and cultural identities. 1. Initiatives that connect youth to their ancestral narratives foster a sense of pride and belonging, motivating them to take an active role in their communities. 1. This legacy of exploration and self-discovery encourages the youth to become advocates for cultural preservation and social justice. 1. Creative expression and innovation. The ongoing relevance of the Lost Tribes narrative fosters creativity in various artistic fields. 1. Emerging artists, musicians, and writers draw upon these themes, resulting in fresh expressions that resonate with contemporary audiences. 1. This dynamic interplay between history and creativity ensures that the narrative remains vital and relevant. The multifaceted impact of the Lost Tribes narrative. The story of the Lost Tribes of Israel is far more than an ancient historical account. It is a living narrative that continues to shape identities, inspire cultural expressions, and promote interfaith dialogue. The complexities of the Lost Tribes narrative reveal the diverse ways in which human beings seek connection, meaning, and understanding. Cultural significance. The narrative plays a crucial role in affirming the identities of various communities that claim descent from the Lost Tribes. It provides a sense of belonging, cultural pride, and continuity, allowing individuals and groups to connect with their historical roots while navigating the challenges of modernity. Religious and spiritual dimensions. The Lost Tribes narrative influences contemporary religious thought, providing fertile ground for messianic beliefs and interfaith collaborations. It serves as a point of connection between diverse faith traditions, fostering mutual respect and understanding. Artistic and intellectual contributions. The richness of the Lost Tribes narrative inspires artistic expression and scholarly inquiry. Through literature, music, visual arts, and academic studies, the story continues to evolve, engaging new audiences and encouraging deeper explorations of identity and history. Global connections and social justice. The ongoing search for the Lost Tribes exemplifies the quest for cultural recognition and social justice. As communities advocate for their rights and heritage, the narrative serves as a unifying force, connecting individuals across geographical and cultural boundaries. A legacy of exploration and discovery. The story of the Lost Tribes inspires future generations to embrace their histories and explore the complexities of identity. By engaging with their past, individuals can contribute to a more inclusive and empathetic society, recognizing the shared humanity that transcends cultural divides. As we conclude our exploration of the Lost Tribes of Israel, it becomes clear that this narrative, steeped in myth and history, continues to resonate across cultures and generations. Whether through claims of descent, cultural practices, or artistic expressions, the legacy of the Lost Tribes is a testament to the enduring power of stories to shape our identities, connect us with our ancestors, and inspire us to build a more just and equitable world. Ongoing research initiatives. As interest in the Lost Tribes narrative continues to grow, so does the academic and grassroots research surrounding it. This section discusses current research initiatives, collaborative efforts, and their potential impact on understanding the complexities of the Lost Tribes. Collaborative academic research. 1. Interdisciplinary studies. Scholars from various fields, including anthropology, history, linguistics, and genetics, are collaborating to provide a multifaceted understanding of the Lost Tribes. 1. This interdisciplinary approach allows for more comprehensive explorations that draw on different methodologies and perspectives. 1. Documenting oral histories. Initiatives focused on collecting oral histories from communities that claim descent from the Lost Tribes are becoming increasingly important. 1. By documenting personal narratives, researchers help preserve cultural heritage and provide insight into how these communities perceive their identities. Field studies and archaeological research. 1. Ongoing archaeological excavations. Archaeological teams continue to explore regions associated with the ancient Israelites. 1. Excavations in places like northern Israel, the Galilee, and areas surrounding the former Assyrian Empire aim to uncover artifacts that may shed light on the lives and movements of these tribes. 1. Exploration of indigenous connections. Researchers are also examining connections between indigenous groups in Africa, Asia, and the Americas with ancient Israelite culture. 1. These studies aim to validate claims of descent and promote a deeper understanding of historical migrations. Genetic studies and heritage research. 1. Genetic testing initiatives. Community members and researchers are utilizing genetic testing to explore ancestral connections. 1. For example, studies among the Lemba community in southern Africa have found markers suggesting a connection to Jewish ancestry, sparking interest in further genetic studies. 1. The ethical dimension of genetic research. As genetic testing becomes a tool for exploring heritage, it raises ethical considerations regarding consent, interpretation, and the implications of such findings. 1. Researchers must navigate these complexities sensitively, ensuring that communities have agency over their narratives. Global collaborative projects. 1. International networks of descendants. Networks of communities claiming descent from the lost tribes are emerging, facilitating collaboration and exchange of resources. 1. These networks promote solidarity among diverse groups and enhance visibility for their shared narratives. 1. Cultural exchange programs. Initiatives that connect individuals from different cultures claiming ties to the lost tribes encourage dialogue and understanding. 1. Participants often share traditional practices, fostering appreciation for the diversity of experiences tied to the narrative. Personal testimonials and stories. Personal stories from individuals and communities significantly enrich the understanding of the lost tribes narrative. This section highlights testimonials that reflect the profound impact of this narrative on identity, faith, and community. Lemba community stories. 1. Cultural practices. Members of the Lemba community often recount how their customs reflect a connection to ancient Israelite traditions. 1. For instance, their adherence to certain dietary laws and religious practices provides a tangible link to their ancestral claims. 1. Rediscovery of heritage. Many Lemba individuals describe their journey of rediscovering their heritage after being informed about their Israelite ancestry through historical research. 1. This rediscovery has inspired them to connect more deeply with their traditions and engage with the global Jewish community. B'nai Menashe experiences. 1. Journey to Israel. Many B'nai Menashe individuals share stories of their journey to Israel, describing it as a fulfilling spiritual pilgrimage. 1. Their migration is often framed as a return to their ancestral homeland, reinforcing their claims of descent from the lost tribes. 1. Cultural integration. Upon settling in Israel, B'nai Menashe individuals navigate the complexities of cultural integration while maintaining their unique traditions. 1. Their experiences highlight the challenges and joys of balancing ancestral identity with modern life in Israel. Indigenous voices from the Americas. 1. Igbo and Cherokee connections. Some individuals from indigenous communities in the Americas, such as the Igbo in Nigeria and certain Cherokee groups, share personal narratives that connect them to the lost tribes. 1. These stories reflect a desire to reclaim their heritage and affirm their identity in the face of historical oppression. 1. Cultural revitalization efforts. Members of these communities often engage in cultural revitalization efforts, celebrating their traditions while seeking recognition for their claims. 1. This process reinforces their sense of identity and pride in their heritage. Future implications for cultural exchange and social justice. The ongoing exploration of the lost tribes narrative holds significant implications for cultural exchange and social justice in a globalized world. This section discusses how these narratives can inform broader conversations about identity, representation, and justice. Cultural exchange as a tool for understanding. 1. Bridging divides. The narrative of the lost tribes provides an opportunity to bridge cultural divides and promote understanding among diverse communities. 1. By recognizing shared histories, individuals can foster empathy and solidarity in a world marked by division. 1. Global storytelling. Emphasizing storytelling as a means of cultural exchange allows for the sharing of diverse narratives. 1. Global storytelling initiatives can highlight the commonalities between different groups while honoring their unique experiences. Social justice and recognition. 1. Advocacy for marginalized communities. The narratives of the lost tribes can serve as a rallying point for advocating for the rights of marginalized communities. 1. By amplifying these voices, social justice movements can draw attention to issues of historical injustice, cultural erasure, and the need for recognition. 1. Policy implications. The growing awareness of communities claiming descent from the lost tribes can influence policy decisions regarding cultural heritage, immigration, and land rights. 1. Recognizing these narratives in policy discussions fosters inclusivity and respect for diverse identities. Interfaith cooperation for justice. 1. Collaborative efforts. Interfaith initiatives that focus on the narratives of the lost tribes can lead to collaborative efforts for social justice. 1. By uniting around shared values, religious communities can work together to address systemic issues and advocate for marginalized populations. 1. Global citizenship and responsibility. The narratives encourage a sense of global citizenship and shared responsibility for justice and equity. 1. By recognizing the interconnectedness of human experiences, individuals can actively engage in creating a more just and equitable world. Final reflections. The enduring legacy of the lost tribes of Israel encapsulates a rich tapestry of myth, history, and identity. As we have explored throughout this comprehensive study, the narrative of the lost tribes continues to shape cultural expressions, religious beliefs, and social justice movements worldwide. Continuity and change. The ongoing search for the lost tribes reflects humanity's quest for connection, understanding, and belonging. Each generation interprets and reinterprets the narrative, ensuring its relevance in contemporary discourse. Shared humanity. The narrative transcends cultural boundaries, inviting people to explore their histories while fostering respect for diverse identities. In a world marked by complexity and division, the story of the lost tribes serves as a reminder of our shared humanity and the universal desire for recognition and belonging. Inspiration for the future. As communities continue to engage with the lost tribes narrative, they draw strength and inspiration from their histories. This ongoing exploration encourages individuals to embrace their identities, advocate for social justice, and contribute to a more inclusive and compassionate society. In conclusion, the narrative of the lost tribes of Israel remains a powerful testament to the enduring impact of stories in shaping our understanding of ourselves and others. It challenges us to reflect on our histories, embrace our identities, and strive for a future marked by unity, empathy, and social justice.
Thank you for watching this channel. Please like, subscribe and get notified for